We've got a post here we're going to look at from Fliegertoni. Fliegertoni is trying to fix issues with bounce backs after forward flips. Um, that's a really common problem, and I will say that I, I I used to think that you needed to be on 4S in order to solve that problem, because all the pilots who had rock solid flips were flying 4S, and since I switched to a quality set of ESCs, I no longer think that. My front flips have almost no bounce back at all, and I'm going to evangelize loud and clear that quality ESCs make a huge difference in how your copter flies. So you've got DYS-20 running BL Heli 14. DYS-20 are not bad ESCs. They're probably better than average ESCs. But if you really want your copter to fly great, upgrade your ESCs is my new mantra. Um, so I'm still flying 3S, and I cannot believe how well my copter handles since I got a good set of ESCs. And you might ask, well, what's the difference? Who cares, right? And the answer is that the hardware on the ESCs controls how effective the ESCs are at braking, and it controls how quickly and strongly the ESCs can turn the transistors on and off. Um, and that's a direct correlation to how responsive your motors can be. So a good set of ESCs, I will never cheap out on ESCs on a multi-rotor ever again. And fortunately, I mean it sucks for you if you've already bought a set of ESCs, you already spent, 40 bucks on a set of budget ESCs, because the difference between a set of budget ESCs or middle of the road ESCs and a set of like really good ESCs, you can get little B's for 16 bucks. Um, at most you're going to pay 20 bucks for a really good ESC. And honestly, given the difference it makes in your copter's flight handling, it's well worth it. So you go from 40 bucks for a set of middle of the road ESCs to 55 bucks, 60 bucks. Did I do my math right? Yeah, 60 bucks. Okay, so it's 20 bucks more. It's 60 bucks. That's not nothing. But at the same time, you're going to spend 300 bucks to 500 bucks building the copter. What's another 20 bucks, especially given the difference it makes. Okay, so you're not going to probably rip your ESCs out and throw them away and buy new ones. So we'll still see what we can do for you. But um, you asked about your D gain and whether your D gain was too high. You are flying PID controller 2, Lux Float, and the D values here don't immediately strike me as excessive. So a D value in the mid 20s to mid 30s on PID controller 2, or even PID controller 1, that doesn't strike me as excessive. There's not. So probably we're going to find that your D is not too high. We will certainly look and see though. The other thing you mentioned is that you've got some jello in your videos and you've got a Mobius that's hard mounted. So first of all, I fly with the rubber bobbins and an isolated camera mount. I also can't get jello that I really can't get rid of if I don't do that. If I have the bobbins, though, I have basically no jello whatsoever. So I don't know if, I mean, you have a ZMR, so you should pretty much be able to get any kind of accessories you want. I would consider putting some rubber bobbins and a camera plate on there. I know people like to hard mount, and a lot of people fly hard mounted and don't have a problem. I'm just not one of them. Now, I do fly 6-inch props, and 6-inch props are going to spin a little bit slower than the 5-inch props you're flying. And so your noise is going to be slightly higher frequency than mine. So you actually are in a better position than I am as regards to jello. But I hate seeing jello in my videos, and so I just want to get rid of it if at all possible. So consider getting some isolation mounting, some rubber bobbins, and making an isolated camera plate. The Mobius is such a light camera, it's really easy to do. It's not like a GoPro where it might be pretty intensive to try and figure out how to do that. The other thing is that the Mobius, if you've got the A lens, which is the default lens that comes with, that's you see that most often. If you bought a Mobius and you didn't explicitly buy one of the other lenses, you probably got the A lens. The A lens is not very wide angle, and the wider angle lens that you have, the less vibrations will show up. And I won't stretch the video out by talking about why that is. So you see some of these pilots and they're flying these like really wide angle lenses, and that's helping them avoid jello. So another thing you could consider doing if you want to see less of the jello is switching to like a C lens module. Unfortunately, the C lens module is something like last I checked, like 35 bucks on Amazon, and it's just a drop-in module. You open up the camera, you undo the little retaining clip that holds the ribbon cable in, and you just take the whole lens module out. You put the other lens module in, you plug it in, and now you have the new C lens, which is a wider angle lens. You can also get an individual screw-in lens that does not include the rest of the module, but it can be a little tricky focusing it. You have to screw it in and if you can put the camera in webcam view, that may make it easier because you can do it sort of live video out, or if you can just if you have a video out cable, you could hook it up to a television. But if you don't have those things, you're gonna like screw the lens a tiny bit and then shoot a video and then put the SD card in your computer and see if the video is sharp and then screw the lens a tiny bit. It's going to be a real pain in the butt. So the advantage of buying the lens module is that the lens is pre-focused and it just drops right into the camera. So consider getting a wider angle camera, and that'll help you with the jello. Also consider putting your camera on an isolation mount. Okay, let's get into the Blackbox log now. The first thing I wanted to do is just check your gyros. You didn't include a config dump, so I don't know whether you're flying what you're flying. But from the look of your gyros, I would guess that either you're flying Betaflight, haha, or you're flying stock 1.10 with gyro LPF equals 42. And I don't, again, I'm just going to quickly look back. I don't think he said Days 32, right? Oh, you did say, oh, thank goodness. Okay, thank you so much for that. Betaflight V2. Okay. So if you're running Betaflight, you're not going to get much better in terms of filtering in the gyros. That's just pretty much as good as it's going to get. So there's nothing I can really tell you for improving the filtering and improving the responsiveness. You're running dterm cut 20, and I kind of wonder why you made that decision. The default value for dterm cut on Betaflight V2 is 40. It used to be 20 as it was a normal starting point for Betaflight V1. That's no longer the case. The default has changed, and that is probably hurting your copter's ability to handle bounce back at the end of flips and rolls because it's adding additional latency to the PID loop. So definitely put that back to the default of 40 and not 20, unless you have done some tuning that has told you there's excess noise in the D term and that requires you to cut that down. So now I've got your roll and your pitch PID and gyro traces up, and I'm specifically going to look for a place where you've got high throttle because that's going to bring out any bad tendencies that might be there. So here you raise the throttle, and we're going to look for oscillation in the P term, and we don't see it very much. Again, especially on pitch, P term is really well behaved. Not, if there is oscillation, we're going to see it on the roll axis on a mini quad because of the weight distribution, and I've talked about that before. And we really don't see very much at all. It's very well behaved, not a lot of oscillations. So it's possible you could raise your P gain a little bit. It's a little hard to judge. Betaflight seems to handle the P term a little bit differently. The P term seems to be very well behaved, and I don't know if that's a function of the filtering. I mean, it must be, right? But it's very well behaved, and it's a little hard to tell when P is getting too high. There seems to be a wider range of values where P can be sort of acceptable and well behaved, and you feel the difference when you're flying, but the traces don't necessarily show it. So that being said, I don't see any oscillations, but I think it can be a little bit harder to tell with Betaflight when you're getting close to the oscillation point because the traces will kind of look good right up until they start looking bad. So you could give a try at raising P a little bit, and that may sharpen up the response of the copter. But definitely look for oscillations, and if they start to appear, knock it back down again. I would also suggest raising one axis at a time so that if you do get oscillations, you know where they're coming from. And the roll axis is going to show the oscillations first, so you could work that one up first. The other thing I see when I'm looking at this is that your D term seems relatively uh, not very active. So your D gain certainly is not too high. Notice that right here, the D term trace is well below the P term trace in magnitude. Um, and here we've got a case, we got something going on. Oh, here's a roll. Okay, so, and we don't see oscillation here during the roll. We don't see any hard P term oscillations. We do see a little bit of bouncing in the D term, so maybe D doesn't need to go any higher. It's active, that's okay, it's doing its job. Same thing here on the pitch axis. Yeah, D is not really doing much. I mean, it's doing something obviously, but it's not going crazy or anything. A little bit of oscillation here. Maybe P doesn't need to go any higher. What do we got here? We'll go the other way. So now here in this much more, you're doing a roll or doing just maybe just a bounce to the side. It's more dynamic, and again, we still aren't seeing any real ringing or oscillation in the P term. It's not going back and forth. Here's an example of what we might look for in the P term that we would call ringing or oscillation, and we're not really seeing it. So it's possible you could raise your P a little bit and roll certainly. And let's find another high throttle location. So here, this is an example of P term oscillation on roll. What did you do here? You raised throttle, but your throttle's not super high and your throttle was low. So I'm guessing you did a drop. You did a drop and catch. And this is a little bit of oscillation at the very bottom of the catch. That's one of the hardest places for the PID algorithm to deal with, where you've just fallen through your own prop wash. You're falling relatively quickly. The motors are idling, and then whoop, suddenly they spin up and it has to catch itself. So here we do have some oscillation, and the D term is larger than the P term. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, whether you care about that and want to try and tune that out, that's sort of up to you. Um, some people will accept that there's going to be a little bit of oscillation during times like this, but on the flip side, the copter's going to fly a lot sharper the rest of the time. Again, don't judge the D term here too harshly until you put your D term cut back to 40, because the D term cut of 20 is definitely delaying the D term, putting it out of phase with the P term a little bit, delaying it relative to the P term, and as a result, it's less able to do what it needs to do. And so you really can't judge the D term gain very effectively while the D term is sort of operating with one hand behind its back. So you definitely want to fix that before you make any judgments. Um, yeah, I don't think I would raise D anymore. There's some cases where D is just quiet and doesn't seem to be doing much, and you think, oh, you could probably raise D. But then there's definitely other cases in more sort of dynamic flight conditions where D is definitely much more active, and you probably wouldn't want to see it go any higher. So probably leave D gain about where it is. Consider raising P gain. Maybe use TPA to tame any little oscillations that pop up. I don't know. I'm not seeing it fly, so I'm not sure. But there you go. Hope that's helpful and happy flying.